there's so much value in failure. And a lot of times, even like at the beginning of my business, I tried to do this kind of like membership thing, and it totally failed. And it was a necessary failure for me to step into what I'm doing now, which is working one-on-one with women in group settings with food freedom and body image. And so, yeah, I think we can hold expectations, but holding them loosely of like, this is how I think it's going to go. Like, I think this membership is going to be awesome. And then when it's not, how do I pivot from that and find something that really is in alignment?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH. Today's guest is a former CrossFit Games team champion, a powerhouse of positivity, and a woman who has redefined strength, both inside and out. Most of you may know her from the competition floor, but her real impact comes from the way she uplifts others and comes from the way she reminds us that true wellness is more than just PRs and six packs. Today, I'm excited to introduce Tasia Lancaster. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I know you as Tasia Percevecz, but being able to say your new last name, your married last name, how did that feel in the little ring to the ear?
It feels great. I love taking my husband's last name, and most people in the CrossFit space know me as, Tasia Percevecz. That's like typical what they experience, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool to have a new last name as well.
Yeah, for sure. What does that mean to you, right? Like in a world of highlights and PRs and personal notoriety and like, I want to do the thing and I want the spotlight on me. I want the credit. To be able to just pause and be like, hey, I met my best friend, my partner in crime. We navigated the human experience and crossed paths in a very organic way through the business world. But then eventually just like connected. And the way you lit up when we talked briefly online or offline rather about him was just, it was so cool. So what does it mean to you to be able to kind of be a married woman and realize that like, wow, I never anticipated like meeting my best friend the way I did. And now I get to navigate the human experience alongside him.
Yeah, well, definitely grateful, feeling very, very blessed that the Lord placed James, my husband, in my path. And, I believe that we became one flesh when we were married. And so it's different, right? My focus isn't just on me and what I need to do and get done. It's like my family, the other half of me, James, and having that as a priority. And it's just such a blessing to go through life with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, right? Marriage isn't perfect. It
No way.
has its own set of challenges, but it really deepens your understanding of self, like sacrifice and love, and just so many beautiful things that come from being in a relationship like that.
Mm-hmm. The idea of perfection is interesting to me because I don't know that we would even want it to be perfect. Because it's like, okay, if it's not causing any tension and it's just this seamless forward flowing river, there's no friction points that are going to force us to change or upgrade our operating system or be forced into having the hard conversations to create consistency, transparency, connection. And inevitably, like life's going to pull you in different directions, especially since he owns a business, you own a business. There's going to be different focal points throughout the day. But then being able to come back to that nucleus or to that anchor and being like, hey, what are your honest thoughts here? Knowing that this person has your best interest and isn't always going to tell you the things that are going to make you feel good, but it's an honest, real conversation that's going to move the needle forward in the right direction. What does that mean to you to be able to realize that, like, hey, pain seems to be the only thing that really changes humans and creates forward momentum, but it doesn't always feel good with the person that you're like, oh, like, I want this to feel good with this person.
Yeah, I think that's super applicable not only to marriage, but life, right? When we're going through change, it's going to be uncomfortable. You mentioned painful. And that's how we're refined, how we become more of ourselves. And, you even said anchor, which I thought was like such a great description of a marriage of like, they're my anchor. And I don't want him to just fluff me up all the time and say, you're awesome, do this. It's like, no, challenge me of where I have blind spots. And I need someone to say, yeah, you're missing it here. We need to do it here or whatever. And so, I love that balance of marriage. And like you said, there's discomfort and suffering is how we're refined and how we grow and change and become more of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Tasia, you have such a cool story from growing up in your childhood with gymnastics, which is such a aesthetically rigid sport around being skinny, being small, lines, and things that are maybe former societal norms that created like scores and performance oriented mindset and chasing this ideology of like perfection. And that transitioned into a college life of like, F that, I'm going to let loose a little bit. But then the same thing of like this female social norm of like, be skinny, weigh this, look this way, do extra cardio, starve yourself, or do these things in order to fit into this society's box that doesn't look at hormones, doesn't look at how you feel, doesn't look at your relationships, and just judges you based on a false perception of reality, which then led to your CrossFit experience, where some of that tension eased a little bit. Some of those waves weren't quite as big, but the waves were still there in performance chasing and the pressure of being on Team Mayhem and pursuing the podium and lifting this and looking this way and wearing the red or the white shirt leading into every event, to eventually you having some health concerns, the lonely chapter where nobody really understood, nobody was really checking in, and you're like, hey, why aren't you competing anymore? And it was kind of this like chapter of uncertainty, which is around the time when I kind of met you a little bit. And then it was like, you know what? I'm going to go get lost in nature. I'm going to go figure out fishing and hunting and rucking and connecting with myself and grounding, which then led to the connection with your husband and all the entrepreneurial things that you've kind of unlocked since. Just to give people a little bit of like a blanket statement roadmap. Going back to your childhood, what was that like? Like, I'm sure in the beginning you were stoked on gymnastics. You're trying to do cool things and flips and twists and turns, and you stood out and got lots of love and validation. What was that like early on, and that how did that kind of formulate your headspace as a child?
Sure. Yeah. Gymnastics in the 90s was very challenging culture. And you mentioned it as you were going through that of always trying to be smaller. Like from a very young age, I remember starting to get weighed and body fat tested at 13 years old when I had no body fat on me at all. But just already from there, it's like this line of you need to be smaller, you need to be tinier. And that's what created good gymnasts is what I was told, what culture told me. And so from a very young age, I struggled with restriction, just really wanting to change my body to be smaller because I was so passionate about gymnastics. I wanted to go to the Olympics like all the little girls growing up. And your brain's not fully formed, right, at this time. And so you're really like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And that really impacted a lot of my life. But seeing now, right, of what my business is, and I help women through that. I'm not the only person who's been through that experience. A lot of women in sports and not in sports are put under this pressure at such a young age to look a certain way. And we see how that can lead to disordered eating, body image issues, self-esteem issues, so many different things, perfectionism that can drive some of these things. So it was definitely very challenging, but I'm grateful for it now and what I do.
Yeah, I mean, you going through adversity helped formulate you. And I mean, I can echo that. I mean, that's the whole ideology and creation of ALLSMITH is what is a smith? It's forging yourself underneath extreme heat and adversity, underneath an anvil, because most people are either in adversity, just left adversity, or they're approaching adversity. And so when I went through my own version of that, it was like, oh, ironically, we're actually all smiths. Cool. The brand is born. We're
Mm-hmm.
forged. We're not found. And I think that's what it is for you, is like you didn't just find yourself randomly in the middle of a workout. It was part of it. It was forging yourself in the midst of deep discomfort. It was realizing that, like, okay, like there's a certain standard that people want us to hit here, but a lot of those standards are not necessarily good for hormone cycle, for headspace, for optimizing the human experience. And when you look at that traditional like spectrum or parabola, it's like sickness, wellness, fitness. And I think what's difficult, Tasia, is that like I think when you get so deep into fitness, fitness actually becomes second. It becomes sickness, fitness, wellness. And you and I both know a lot of CrossFit Games athletes and gymnasts and professional athletes that it's like, I mean, even Michael Jordan. I mean, he's coming out now of like, hey man, I'm trying to mask my anxiety in between his gambling and his drinking. He was trying his best to optimize performance or fitness. And it's just like, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying like in pursuit of peak performance and fitness comes things that aren't necessarily the best because you're trying to squeeze every little bit of juice out that orange. You lose balance, you lose connection with self, and like you get a singular focus over here. And what I'm curious about with you, Tasia, is what's your advice for other girls that are chasing validation in all of the wrong places?
Hmm. That's a really good question. You know, I would say to really go dive deep internally, right? This is a lot of the work that I do with women is how do we build up our self-worth that's not connected to accolades, to what my body looks like, to how much money I have, to how many followers I have, because none of those things are going to fulfill you. They're not. You can have all of those things, and we see that people have all of those things and they're miserable. And so to develop a healthy self-worth, and for me, a lot of that is anchored in my faith of knowing what God says about me, that I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. I'm made in the image of God, and that He'll be with me and through these challenges and these different things. And so I don't think it's a simple, straightforward answer of like, hey, just do this and you'll be able to like let go of seeking validation from others or all the wrong places. But it takes a lot of internal work of understanding your story, your past story, maybe some of the cognitive distortions you're struggling with, where you place your value, where you find your value, your self-esteem, your self-worth, and unpacking that. And so I definitely think it's a process, but something that's so, so worth it, because being connected to these worldly things, seeking our validation or worth there, will always leave us empty.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. And I mean, as somebody has gone through the lonely chapter and been in life post fitness and validation from how much I lifted or the time on a workout or body image or whatever the thing was, it's hard to create buy-in for somebody that's in that, right? Like they're getting the love, they're getting the DMs, they're getting the sponsorship opportunities, the bank accounts going up. So they're like, Tasia, why should I listen to you? You're the black sheep. You're different. You're not one of us anymore, right? And it's like people don't totally conceptualize that. And it's tough because you don't want to like force them to that journey. You'd love to like enlighten and share, but there's not always space for that when they're constantly in pursuit of, zone 2 work, their lifting session, 2 to 5 metcons a day. They got to meet the time frames and the pressures that come with that. And if they don't do those things, there's intrinsic guilt, but there's also like, wow, like I'm not going to perform at the highest level. And you know that because you were a part of that cult and that tribe for a long time. But it's also like the way you go from A to B is not how you go from B to C,
Mm.
right? And like often people say like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But what you don't realize is it is broken. There is a better way. And so what are your thoughts as to how to create that buy-in, maybe for somebody that is at the last couple years of their high level fitness career that is maybe starting to search, starting to wonder, but it's like they go back to the familiarity of like, you know what, I'm going to compete in this year's open. Maybe I'll dabble with the World Fitness Project. Maybe I'll do a little bit of high rocks. It satisfies the expectations of my sponsors. I can keep making a couple grand a month. I can do the social media thing. But it's like if you always do what you've always done, you'll always be what you've always been. So how do you kind of create that bridge so that other people don't have to experience what you went through?
Hmm. Yeah. So, what I will say is that you have to be willing, right, to
Oh
explore
yeah.
something different. That's part of it. We can't force anyone to make that decision. And also, that the transition out of professional sport, as you know, many know, is very challenging. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. And so I see why people just stay in it for years and years and years. I literally had to be forced out by my
Hmm.
health. Otherwise, I might have still been there. And that's not to say, I want to be really clear too. I think there's so much value. Like, I know you agree here in competing and pushing ourselves. And there is this level of, you can't just have like full healthy balance when you're trying to be the pinnacle of your sport. That's not realistic. But when you're getting towards that kind of later stage of thinking about, oh, maybe I want to transition, I think that's looking at what are the other things you enjoy outside of CrossFit, outside of competing, and learning more about yourself. Because I know for me specifically, my focus was so heavily CrossFit, that I wasn't thinking about those external things. I wasn't, even considering what it would look like to own my own business. And so, really exploring what are your passions, what are your hobbies, what are the things you like to do that light you up, outside of CrossFit. And that's a really good starting place.
How did you come to that realization though? Right? Like at the time, you don't know what you don't know. And so did you see like what were the things that were popping up into your lenses? Was it, oh, I'm seeing my performance decline, I'm watching my interest float away? Um, Something that really stood out to me was, what are the conversations that we're having? Are they always comparison of times and weights and other people and judgment? Or was it exploration into, hey, what are some of the things that we can do within workouts as far as transitions or cleaning up some of the mundaneness associated with chalking or fixing grips, or the little things that really allow you on the team side of things to like trim the fat on wasted time? What was the thing that kind of popped up for you as far as like, okay, like I'm navigating this seemingly made up sport with controversial judging and something that has challenging video analysis. Every year, the rules are kind of changing. And it's super cool and it lights your heart on fire ish, but it also unlocks reservoirs of anxiety and frustration. And how many times can you justify to yourself control the controllable before you're like, hey, this just isn't working anymore? I'm ready to move on.
Hmm. Well, for me, I've been pretty open about this. I was having health issues that partly forced me out. So I feel like I almost have an out in a sense of like most people that are navigating it, they might still be healthy. Um, but even, my last competition was Wadapalooza 2020, right before like the world shut down. And that was like my best competition. Like I was still able to perform, but I could tell that my health was just really suffering. I didn't feel well. I had like my blood markers were all over the place. And yeah, I just was really struggling. And so I guess in a sense of, things were a little bit different back up to 2020 in the CrossFit space as far as things were, I feel like, more similar as they've changed a lot from 2020 to 2025 as far as like shifting to semifinals and affiliate, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I didn't have too many frustrations in that aspect. But for me, it was mainly health focused of like, this was like a push out. And I actually said, hey, I'm going to take this year off and I'm going to come back. That was my
Mm-hmm.
plan. I'm going to take this year off and get really healthy because, I planned to compete for, a long time. I really enjoyed competing. And, once I did kind of get forced out and have some time away, I discovered, oh, there's all these other things that I love to do. And I felt like the Lord was leading me in a different way. And that's not to say I didn't really miss it or still like, especially in the beginning stages. was like, people would always ask me like, are you coming back? Like, when are you coming back? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't think so. And then it was just really finalized. So I feel like my experience is different in a sense because in some ways it was my choice to step away, but I think my performance would have started to decline based on my health anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just was like a no-brainer, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
What I'm hearing there, Tejas, life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us.
Hmm.
And I was kind of similar in the sense of like tearing my UCL in a heavy snatch. And, over the course of time, even though I kept fighting it, it led to then doing some chest to bar pull ups and tearing the brachioradialis to the point where the elbow was like hanging on by a thread.
Ooh.
I was like, all right, man, like something's telling you to move on. If you can't drink a cup of coffee or walk your dog without elbow pain. And it's like, I don't know. I almost feel that is like a really beautiful blessing because it helps soften the stubborn athlete mindset of like, I'm stepping away because of lack of interest or decrease in performance or whatever thing that feels like a cop out that maybe doesn't align with the athlete mindset. It gives you the idea to like pause. And within that pause, you can gain clarity. You can gain understanding. You can seek to understand through in-depth conversations with people that you love and care about. And through that, you might journal, you might lean to the Lord, you might lean into faith, you might lean into some alone time. Some people might lean into distraction. But what comes to mind there is just because you're fit doesn't mean that you're okay. And I want to unpack that a little bit because there's silent struggles that a lot of these athletes deal with, and they use fitness as a tool for distraction. If I just work harder, it's going to be okay. If I just get stronger, it'll be okay. And I got to make it to that session, and then I've got to hit this piece, and then my mobility, and then I have body work, and then I need to go and get food, and then I need to do a sponsor shoot. It's like if you just stay distracted the whole time, you don't ever have to look yourself in the mirror. And so I'm curious your thoughts around the distractions that you see within high level athletes, the burnout, the mental wellness, and the challenges that people face within the CrossFit space that aren't always talked about.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of, maybe burnout or things not talked about. I think we've even seen a lot of high level women come out and talk about their eating stuff or their body image issues. And that's been really encouraging to see like, hey, I'm not alone in this experience of maybe competing at the top level, but still struggling in these ways. And so exercise can be a way to cope. We know that, but it can turn maladaptive, be a maladaptive coping mechanism if used in a way that we're not feeling our emotions, right? We're just shoving everything down and nothing's coming up for us to express or feel. We know that's not helpful, just physiologically, psychologically, to just never express our emotions, just bottle them up and cope in a way. And so I feel like there is more space to talk about it now. As more people have opened up, it's been really encouraging, inspiring to say, hey, no, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm feeling burnt out, or hey, I need space. And that's where some of that balance comes in, right? Like we do need to have an off season. We do need
Yeah.
to make sure we're nourishing our body well. And maybe that's tracking macros, maybe that's not. And so I'm not super dogmatic in my thinking on that, but recognizing that you're an individual person. And so what your needs are going to be different than other people's. And so I think that's a really big piece of the puzzle is being connected to yourself. I talk about this so much in my business because CrossFit oftentimes teaches us to disconnect from our body. And so that is valuable. And there's a time and place to be able to do that in competition, right? We don't want to be like giving into the pain of the workout, but we need to be able to come back to our bodies and understand what's happening inside. Like, hey, no, I have pain, or, I'm dealing with this anxiety that's rising up in my chest. How do I work through this? And so I think that's a very big missed piece, not just in CrossFit, but maybe in athletics all around, is that oftentimes from a young age, we're taught this disconnection from self is just like shut the mind off or shut the body off and just keep going when they're integrated, right? Our mind and body are connected, and it's important that we understand that connection and we're able to tune into what our body is saying. And so I think that's a missed piece that needs to maybe be learned or explored deeper for a lot of athletes.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
Yeah, it's so well said. And it's ironically a little bit of a paradox, because it's like if you feel too much, now you won't perform. So it's like what you're learning in those high level performance stages is the masking of pain, is working through pain, is, I mean, I remember specifically in CrossFit doing heavy farmer carries out on a football field, not only to enhance the grip strength, but to manage the pinching of the hands and to almost deaden the nerves a little bit in the hands. So when we're doing 20 to 30 to 40 chest to bar pull-ups, you're not thinking about the pain and the friction of the hand. You're just thinking, I've done the work to prepare for this moment, keep going. So it's like, it's positive and negative, right? Like everything isn't everything. You need to be able to come back and disassociate from that performance pursuit and realize that there is a wellness pursuit. And that's really difficult because we're taught in our education system, like, hey, just do these things and you'll get the thing. Here's the incentive. Now we can predict the behavior. If you just follow these steps, Tasia, you're going to get the thing. Your life's going to be great. And then you get the thing. And it's almost like Katrin, when she won the games for the first time that Ben Bergeron talks about, where she goes, yeah, we won. Okay, what's next? When do I start training for next year? And it's like, that's tough. And it's easy for me to sit on a podcast and talk about that, but like I lived it too, where it's like, where do the feelings have a place? Where do the feelings get validated of like, wow, like I caught that snatch weird and my elbow feels like it's going to explode, but I don't want to say anything because I want to pursue the peak expression, which is, trying to win the CrossFit Games or maximizing human potential. And I'm sure so many people go through this. Like, I don't want to say anything because then my husband or my wife is going to judge me, or I don't want to say anything, or now I'm a complainer. Now I'm labeled as this. Now I'm not going to be as good or as loved. I think most people are in pursuit of love in some capacity, maybe validation as well. But it's like, being honest isn't always rewarded. So it almost tells you to be dishonest in pursuit of the thing because that's what the world validates. And I'm curious your thoughts and your coaching, not just with yourself, but with your clients in your community. How do you navigate such a complex paradox?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, like definitely time and place, right? Like we want to be able to feel our emotions, but if you're entering into a podcast or a business meeting or on a competition floor, that's not the time and place, right? We want to be able to regulate those emotions. And so as far as like when you were talking about all of the exercise things, yeah, I think being able to shut off is okay. And I also think having autonomy, like some people might say, no, actually I choose to sacrifice my health to win the CrossFit Games. But I don't think that's the only way. So it's like you can make that choice. And if you have an understanding of what that choice looks like, then absolutely go for it. But as far as connection with body and self, it's really even learning how, like what types of emotions we have. I don't know if you've even seen a feelings wheel before, but a lot of times we get kind of stuck in thinking we have like 1, 2, or 3 emotions when we might have deeper emotions under that. And so being able to go, okay, I've had this like pent up experience from childhood, because we are multifaceted human beings. There are things that are impacting us from our upbringing, from what we're taking in from society, from what society cheers for and validates. And so that's a really real thing that it's not saying that we shouldn't want to be seen, loved, or please people, but to say that that's not the ultimate thing, right? The ultimate thing is have my identity secure in who Christ says I am, and to be confident in what I'm doing, walk in alignment with my values. So it looks like building up personal values. Like, what are the things that I care about outside of maybe like awards, what my body looks like, success, these different things. So building up personal values, building up self-worth, listening to our thoughts and talking back to our thoughts. I think that's a big thing, is a lot of times we're just listening to ourselves without being like, what is that thought? Can I challenge it? Is that true? Is it rooted in truth? Is it black and white? And so very layered, but ultimately, with clients specifically, it's looking at the mindset. A lot of these deep rooted core beliefs we might have are impacting us and influencing us in our day-to-day patterns. And so we have to be able to slow down and pause, take our thoughts captive, challenge them, reframe them with the truth, and move forward. I don't know if I answered your question. It was kind of all over the place.
No, but I mean, I was dancing all over the place too. I think the way you described it is really cool. I loved what you said around talking back to our thoughts, because there's that famous quote of like, you don't have to believe every thought you have. And I view thoughts almost like cars that are driving past in both directions. And we have the choice to just let them pass, acknowledge them, be like, I see you, but yeah, we're not going to hang out. And then you have the choice to like flag him down and like, hey, roll down your window and like talk to him, talk back to him, like you said. And then we have the choice to like hang on, which is, I view it as like opening the car door and getting in with that thought and be like, all right, let's do a little adventure with this thought. And I think what's really interesting is like thoughts are going to come and go. They're often triggered by something, past experience, current experience, maybe a smell, maybe a song, maybe a look that somebody gave you, and you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Traffic was bad. Parking was bad. You just got a ticket on the way to the gym. Maybe hormones are a little off balance. Maybe we're hungry. Maybe we're sleep deprived. Maybe we had a hard conversation in the morning. Maybe our dog had an accident in the house. There's so many things that are variables that trigger the human experience. And so allowing every thought to just punch you in the face and grab hold of you around the neck, I think is a really good learning lesson of like, hey, that's kind of inappropriate. Let's notice, let's acknowledge, and then we can choose if we want to play with that thought or not. What are your thoughts around how to navigate some of these thoughts that are going to come and go?
Yeah. And so first, like you said, is pausing with the thoughts. Do I even think about what I'm thinking about? Because a lot of us are just moving automatically through the day, and we're not
Yep.
even pausing to think if that thought is true or where it came from. And so pausing, right? Challenging the thought, asking, is this true? What are the consequences of believing this thought? Where did this thought originate from? Is it even like, because when we think about, like, I'm thinking about body image and food type language, is like, maybe this was a thought my mother had that she put onto me, that I have just ingrained into myself, thinking this is a belief that I have. And so challenging that thought and reframing it with more truthful thoughts. And so I know that sounds like a lot of work, but we do it in a very slow way of just first noticing, right? It's like, first, can I just even notice, be present with the thoughts bouncing around my head? And when one comes up that's going to change my behavior, can I pause before I do that and question it? And it also, like, our nervous system impacts this as well, right? If we are stuck in kind of that sympathetic state, then we're not going to have as many rational thoughts. We're going to have more irrational thoughts. And so it's understanding our whole self, like the integration of like where I'm at health-wise too, and where my nervous system, am I really dysregulated? That plays into our thought life as well.
For sure. How much is that impacted by environment and by the community that you choose to associate with, right? That famous line, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you're trying to notice and pause, but you're in a hustle culture, it's all gas, no brakes all the time. Everybody's sympathetic in that fight or flight response. More is better. We're just trying to do more all the time, just like fit as much as we can in. Don't feel, don't think, just perform. And that is kind of hustle culture. And that's like rewarded right now of like, wake up at 5 a.m., have your cold plunge, your morning routine, video it all. You're an influencer, you're an entrepreneur, you're a server, a coach, you're all the things. And don't sleep. You'll sleep when you're dead. More emails, more content. Rah rah rah. And like that works until it doesn't work anymore. So, what are your thoughts as to how environment and community impact the ability to pause and gain deep, meaningful understanding of like, is this serving me or is it not?
Yeah, it plays a huge role, as you just said, right? If I'm surrounded by all the people that are just hustling to the point of exhaustion, then me kind of being the outlier and changing that is going to matter. And we know our nervous system is always scanning. It's scanning what's going on within our body, it's scanning what's going on in the environment, and it's scanning for people around us, right? The state of their nervous system. And so we're impacted by our environment and people around us that can put us into a state of dysregulation as well. And so I think it is so important. And that's not to say just, hey, drop all of your friends and move to a different way of life, although that could be an option for you if that's really what you want and desire. But making small steps to just even understand if is this what I want, because it works, like you said, until it doesn't. We can push our health to the limit until we're ill and sick. There is a cost to stress. And so I think oftentimes when we're kind of stuck in that hustle culture, we're not thinking about the consequences of the possibility of, if I've been chronically stressed for months, years, decades, what does that look like for my longevity and my health?
Mm-hmm. No one teaches you how to stop competing, only to win. When I mention that, what comes to mind for you, Tasia?
I think there needs to be more discussion around what it looks like to stop, and for people to be prepared to, because there is this very difficult transition of like, people are cheering for you and they're excited about the things you're doing. And that is a good thing. I'm not saying that people shouldn't cheer for athletes and all these different things, but that stops at some point when you choose to stop competing. And a lot of athletes aren't ready for that experience of like, oh, like everyone was like cheering for me and now they're not. Am I doing something wrong? Does that mean I'm not doing what I should be? And so that's really just understanding that there needs to be more discussion on what that looks like, and this idea of you being a person that has many different components. You're not just an athlete. I think athletes get stuck in that identity is like, this is my identity, when you're so much more than that.
For sure. Being at a place that's a magnet for high-level athletes like Mayhem, you finished your high-level career. You were going through some health things. You decided to step away from the competition field. You thought you would go back. You chose to not go back. How did you then navigate being in that environment and recognizing that people didn't really understand Tasia the human? They understood Tasia the athlete. How did you overcome? Was it therapy? Was it connection with friends? How did you overcome that element of your identity where you're like, wow, I'm used to being at the peak level performance in the CrossFit Games, to then realizing that you are a human and you have to kind of back off some of those things in pursuit of what really lights your heart on fire. But in that moment, you're seeing all these athletes come in, seeing sponsorships, you're seeing all these things that like got attention, which seems to be some sort of currency in this day and age with social media. And you're almost like the injured athlete in the corner, right? And that sucks. And nobody really gets it. How did you overcome that and also pay it forward? Because other athletes eventually ended up there, whether it was a back injury, people taking a year off, eating challenges, people just needing time and space or burnout. You then proved to be this really loving, optimistic resource that was there when nobody else was. And I love that. And at least that's my lenses from the outside looking in. You found a role. You carved your own role because you could empathize what they were going through?
So for me, it was definitely my faith, and just trusting the Lord's plan for my life, and that He was calling me to surrender CrossFit at that time. And so being able to navigate, I guess, people maybe wanting me to come back or only seeing me in a different lens, came back to me learning myself more. I honestly, my whole life, I was a competitor from literally age 5. I competed in gymnastics all the way through college and transitioned right to CrossFit. And so I didn't know what life looked like without a competition. And actually, soon after I stopped competing, I ran a marathon just to like feeling like I needed to do something to stay in the fight or stay in that fire. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I see that my motivation and intention of like, this is what people want to see me do is like something challenging and not what God's calling me to do. Like, what is in alignment with my values and where I'm supposed to be walking. And so it really came through for me just leaning on the Lord and trusting that where He was leading me mattered, and that going through these different challenges were going to lead me to where I'm now. I honestly just totally mind blown that I'm doing a job that I deeply love so much and feels just so aligned with my entire life and how I want to help women. And so I think that rough patch is, depending on what people, go through, will look different. But for me, was like my faith of just like, hey, I'm just going to take one step. I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
take one step, see what happens, and go from there. Right. And I made mistakes too along the way. And I think that's part of it. People get so scared to make a decision or to try something different. But I like to tell people, it's like, if it fails, you can just try something different again. Like, it's not like the end of the road of like, I tried this thing and it didn't work out. Well, I guess I got to go back to competing. It's like, no, try something different again. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
stepping stone to something different. And I see that even in my career, like working at Mayhem Mission. It was such a great opportunity. I love doing it, but it wasn't my forever thing. But it taught me, it actually is the only reason I met my husband. And so there's reasons why we step into these different, I guess, arenas, even if it's only for a short period of time.
Yeah, you have to have the courage to try and put yourself out there and realize, like, if it's not working, let's try something new. But that takes a deep, meaningful connection with self and really listening to that heart center and the soul's whisper, which isn't always easy. And sometimes we're like, okay, I hear you, but I'm going to go do this thing. And I really do believe that failure is fertilizer, like you said. And it's one of those things of like, I don't know, for me, environment was huge. People were always like, oh, just because you're not competing in CrossFit, you can still do high rocks, you can still do marathon, you can still do tough mud or obstacle course racing or X, Y, and Z competition. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't want to. I'm craving peace. I'm craving a walk on the bay with my dog. I'm craving a fishing trip. I'm craving having a glass of wine with friends and laughing around the campfire. Things that are maybe outside of what I did for the last 25 years. And I think once you come to terms with that, those are forms of fitness. And the reason why I say that is from the world that we come from, it's increased work capacity across broad time and modal domains. Work capacity means your business, relationships, travel, adventure, connection with food, connection with energy, maybe reading, maybe adventures, maybe movies. It depends on what you view as work, or in my terms, I've redefined it as play, increased play capacity across broad time and modal domains while also deepening meaningful connections. And those are things that in pursuit of high level basketball and CrossFit, I neglected a little bit in pursuit of the thing, not purposefully, but just like, hey, I don't have time to, go do that thing because I'm too tired from training, or I need to get up early to train, or I need to eat this instead of that. And I think it's just realizing, like, what do you want? What works? And let's do more of it. And I think getting really clear, not just on what you want, but almost more important is what do you not want? And that's what became clear to me over the course of time. It's like, I don't know that I want to train 6 hours a day anymore. Now I think I want to train like 1 to 2 And I don't want to just keep pursuing work capacity and things in the gym. I want the work capacity and the play capacity to expand outside of the gym. And I think there's a lot of people that want that, but they're afraid because it comes with nobody cares. Right? And it's like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, that's part of the reason why I like the line, nobody cares, work harder. It's not about being like a martyr, but it's more like nobody cares in the beginning. And then you're like, nobody cares. That's freaking awesome. Now I can just go do the things that I love to do. And yeah, I'll do some hard things a couple times a week and like, scratch that itch, but it doesn't have to own me. Like do you have fitness or does fitness have you?
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. And I love just how you said that. Nobody cares because we build it up in our minds oftentimes that we
Mm-hmm.
think people are going to care. They're going to judge us if our body changes, if we're not as fit. If, my games mat when I competed individual is at the gym that I train at, my husband's gym. And sometimes I look up at it and I'm like, I wonder if people have like an expectation of me to just like be super fit, but we build that up in our own minds. And so it's remembering that nobody truly does care. And if they do care, then they're probably not people that you want in your life anyways, if they're like, you should be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's exactly is reminding that thought reframing, taking our thoughts captive, like we were talking about, is this thought, this expectation I have that I have to be CrossFit Games, Tasia, is being perpetuated by my own self. It's not being perpetuated by anyone else around me. And so what am I going to do with that? I'm going to say, actually, no, I'm walking in alignment with my values right now by not training 6 hours a day, and walking in obedience to what God has for me, to work out in a way that allows me to run a business, to adventure, to be with my husband and my dog, and have rest. And so it comes back to that self, right? Of like building up our own self-worth and knowing that our identity is secure.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think is beautiful about the maturation process of this journey that I'm sure you can relate to is you don't have to fill in the blank. I think early on it was like, hey, why aren't you competing anymore? And I'd be like, oh, well, this injury or this is my focus. And I felt the need to like build up like my resume or whatever the stack of evidence was around validation. And I just kind of got to the point where it was just like, I don't know, something else is grabbing my attention now. And I'm just kind of playing over here now. And maybe one day I'll go play over there, but for now this is what's, lighting my heart on fire, and I'm having a lot of fun over here. And I don't know, I don't feel the need to like justify. Sometimes I'm just like, cuz I don't want to. Other times I'm like, I don't know, I crave a different flavor. I'm not craving that same flavor anymore. I don't feel the need to like justify it or fill in that gap or give this elongated explanation. I just follow the Mel Robbins rule of like, let them. If they want to love, cool. If they want to judge, cool. Like, I don't care. What are your thoughts on all of that? Because in the beginning, like you feel the need to like give people this like rah response. And then you're just like, not really interested in putting my energy towards that anymore.
Yeah, exactly that energy, right? We only have so much energy to give. So if I'm going to be worrying about all the people who are judging me negatively, or worrying about all the people, counting the people who are cheering me on, it's like, who has the energy for that? And so let them, I haven't read the book like most people have, but I understand the logic of like, yeah, just let them think whatever they want and move on and
Mm-hmm.
walk in confidence of what you're meant to do, and just be confident in that. And that's what I hear you say is like, no, I'm just confident and this is where I'm meant to be. I'm going through a different season and that's okay. I don't have to explain myself. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important. And like you said, a sign of maturity.
Totally. Hard choices, easy life. Easy choices, hard life. What comes to mind when we unpack that quote right there?
Hard choices, easy life. Yeah, I guess like being willing to risk and make a hard choice. Or wait, you're saying hard choices. If I make a hard choice, easy choices, hard life. Maybe you need to explain it more to me.
So if you just do what's easy all the time, you're typically chasing dopamine, you're chasing
Mm-hmm.
pleasure, right? Like our world is living in a little bit of a comfort crisis.
Mm.
But when you make the hard choice of like, hey, like I'm going to step away from that community, I'm going to step away from that friend group, or I'm going to pursue marriage, or I'm going to change my former way of thinking, which wasn't adding value anymore, and I'm going to do something disruptive and different and choose to be a little bit isolated in the black sheep, which may deepen relationships, it may end relationships. That's a hard choice, but it's a
Mm.
lifestyle adjustment that allows you to evolve for your highest calling and to relate and connect most with your faith and with God. If you keep making the easy choice, it's kind of what's comfortable. It's what you mentioned around like, oh, this isn't working, I'll just go back to competing. And it's the land of like comfortable complacency, which is like, it's easy. It's really not that bad. It's kind of a mediocre life, but it'd be too much work to, pick up at everything and just change it all up. So I'm just going to kind of hang out here a little bit, but it's the region beta paradox. It kind of sucks, but it doesn't suck enough for it to disruptively change your course. And so for you, like when you think about some of the harder choices that you've made in your life, have those unlocked kind of beauty on the other side, but in the beginning was kind of treacherous terrain, like going uphill and kind of like a lot of friction.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like I want to challenge the quote because I think it should be hard choices, more fulfilling life. Because I just
Mm.
don't think easy life exists, like
Mm-hmm.
even when we're making hard choices. But yeah, I agree that making those choices, like stepping away from competing or starting a business, right? These like terrifying choices to step into, they do lead to fulfillment. Maybe not every single time, right? Because we're going to fail and that's part of it. And we have to be comfortable with failing or sitting in the discomfort of failure. But yeah, I definitely agree that just doing what's easy, right? Or choosing what's familiar over and over again is not going to bring us anywhere different, right? We're going to have to be challenged and we'll get stuck if we don't make hard decisions or hard choices.
Totally. That's one of my favorite things about podcasting, Tasia, is like sometimes I'll come in with a relatively fixed mindset, a little bit around like a quote. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I resonate. But then when I have an amazing guest that's a critical thinker like yourself that challenges it and is like, I don't think it's easy. It might be more fulfilling, but the word easy is not really appropriate in that mix. You and I talked about it in the pursuit of being a business owner. People are like, oh yeah, you get to make your own schedule and like, everything is your rhyme, your rhythm, you do the thing, you call the shots. It's like, yeah, then there's decision fatigue, and failure isn't just failure. It's loss of money. It's trying to make U-turns and redirect. It's hard conversations consistently. It goes from, a 6 to 8 hour workday to a 14 to 17 hour workday. And you love every second. It's not complaining. It's just freaking hard. And it's beautiful. And it's full of laughter and frustration and all the different flavors of the true human experience, which I think is part of the reason why we're here, is to experience and to learn and to love and to get punched in the face sometimes and see how we can get back up, which is why the burpee is so beautiful. Um, but I really appreciate the way you said that. Like, I think the challenge is a huge part of this conversation. And I think if more people were open to that, like, hey, I'm not trying to get you to believe me or be on my side. Like, this doesn't need to be this polarizing two different ends of the spectrum. And you can be like, hey, here's an idea. Okay, here's another idea. Let's explore that and play ping pong within the messy middle.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to just have open and honest conversations and to be able to explore different mindsets and perspectives of other people, their opinions, it matters, right? To challenge ourselves and to maybe it actually builds too sometimes if we can explore someone else's opinion or perspective that might deepen our own and our own security or confidence in that. Or maybe we'll chip away at it where we're like, I need to learn a little bit more. And so I think there's huge value, like you said, in being able to have open, honest conversations with people of all different walks of life and being able to just challenge our own perspective.
Mm-hmm. Something that comes to mind here is the worst prison is the one that we build for ourselves with perfectionism. And maybe not even just perfectionism, but expectations. Hey, I'm going to do this thing and I've created this ideology that it's supposed to go this way. And like everybody comes into the ring with a plan until they get punched in the face, right? What's that journey been like for you in creating your own business? You're like, I'm full of excitement. I know that I can love and I can support, but it hasn't gone exactly to plan all the time. And that's not something that always goes into an Instagram highlight reel.
Yeah, there's so much value in failure. And a lot of times, even like at the beginning of my business, I tried to do this kind of like membership thing and it totally failed. And it was a necessary failure for me to step into what I'm doing now, which is working one on one with women in group settings with food freedom and body image. And so, yeah, I think we can hold expectations, but holding them loosely of like, this is how I think it's going to go. Like, I think this membership is going to be awesome. And then when it's not, how do I pivot from that and find something that really is in alignment? And so it's taking those steps like we've kind of talked about throughout the whole podcast is like, can I take a step and see what happens and see what door is opened? And can I hold this expectation loosely? Because I think it's unrealistic sometimes that we're not going to like maybe have an expectation, but to hold it loosely and be open to maybe something even greater than what your expectation is. Because although I had failures early on in my business, where I'm at now, and I'm sure I'll have plenty more failures, but where I'm at now is far greater than what I could have imagined like 2 years ago. So, yeah.
Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyan Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyan is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag or even an overnighter. Kinyan's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyan.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
That the image that comes to mind, Tasia, is like if I'm trying to hold on tight gripped to a bunch of sand, I can't really hold that much sand, which is kind of like all the different angles of entrepreneurship and clients and friends and all the things. But if you kind of like loosely open up your grip, you can kind of hold on to a little bit more, and then you can kind of like play with it and be a little bit more tangible with regards to the holding on to the different grains of sand. And then it allows you, like you said, like you don't know what you don't know, taking that first step and being curious. And I actually think a lot of business ownership is navigating uncertainty, realizing that you don't always have to act. You can just kind of be for a second. But then you also don't want to be for too long because you need to make a move forward, backward, left, or right. And it's funny because have you ever seen the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall?
A long time ago, but yes.
So there's that surfing scene where they're going out to surf and he's like trying so hard and he's like, dude, you got to chill. Like you got to do less. And then he lays there and he does nothing. And they're like, dude, you have to do something. And so then he kind of finds that middle ground of like work and play and flow. And he's not like fighting the water anymore, but he's also not just like laying there doing absolutely nothing. And that's kind of how I feel like the flow is. Like sometimes you have to paddle really hard. Sometimes you have to float and allow the current and the energy to kind of play its role. sometimes your job is to like be in it and kind of be the straw that stirs the drink. And then other times your goal is to kind of like plant the seed and get out of the way and let other people kind of do the thing. But it's really finding that rhythm, finding that balance, finding that flow. And it's a playful nature that often we're all going to screw up a little bit by trying to overuse the paintbrush on the canvas.
Yeah, totally. Being a business owner involves flexibility, or being an entrepreneur, right? Is like, hey, things are going to shift and change. I have to take on a lot of different roles here. And I love what you said too, is like sometimes it's just like stepping back, especially if you have people working under you, and like allowing them to use their talents and giftings in your business. And so I think you explained it really well.
When you're looking at how to be a business owner, just to unlock some tools for the toolbox for other people that are maybe looking to follow suit, it's not just what you see. It's not just, hey, I create graphics for Instagram and I try to be forward facing and share my story and connect and also unlock group connections and whatnot. It's also strategy, it's sequence, it's creating structure in a container, it's creating safety, it's maybe creating a progressive overload phase similar to fitness that like moves people in the right direction over the course of time. But then, Tasia, there's marketing, there's newsletters, there's podcast appearances, there's all those sides of things. There's the pressures of social media, and then there's bookkeeping, administrative side of things, client management systems, trying your best to stay in contact with people. There's lead generation. That just gets cluttered in the mind, right? It's just this big cluster and so many plates spinning in the air. How have you kind of figured out your rhyme and your rhythm with all of those things? Because oftentimes with ALLSMITH, we talk to a lot of business owners. Some people have a systematic process. Other people are all over the place. And then there's people that are kind of in between those two places.
I would consider myself probably in between, although I do time block, and that makes it really easier to navigate, right? Like I have the majority of my client calls on certain days, and those days stay the same, whereas other days might be more dedicated to content creation or the back end stuff you're talking about with bookkeeping and structure and navigating things like that. But, you know, my favorite part of my job is sitting in client calls. And so that's my priority, is to be able to get everything done in a sense so that I can show up on those days for client calls and be fully present and be there for my clients, my one-on-ones and my group clients. And so with that being my focus, it's like, what are the things that need to be done? What are the things I can let go of right now so I can show up on these specific days and times and be fully present? And so everyone's job's a little bit different, obviously, with what they're navigating. But for me, my work's very client-centered, client-focused. And so I need to make sure I'm emotionally, mentally, physically well to show up. And also that things are put in place as far as like time blocking, kind of type A, to make sure those things are done so I can do that.
I love that. It creates a supreme presence that allows you to kind of be here now and not be constantly worrying about the next thing or looking over your shoulder or wondering or just distracted subtly. Let's explore your business a little bit. What is the name and what are some of the core pillars if people are looking to connect with you and explore transformation?
Yeah, so my business is called Wonderfully Made, and it's based on Psalm 139:14, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so it's really integrating, teaching women how to ditch diet culture, this obsession maybe, or hating their body, so that they can live in freedom with food, exercise, in their body. And so we're looking at intuitive eating. I teach women how to eat intuitively. And so to understand how to do that, you have to be deeply connected to self. So we're looking at a lot of different ways, what that is, like mindset, nervous system, understanding, like education, obviously, around food, and then exploring body image. So things that impact our body image, and how do we develop a healthy body image ultimately, in a healthy relationship with food and exercise as well.
That's so beautiful. Something I've noticed in my coaching experience with women is I have some women that wear an Oura ring. A lot of the women that I work with use the Lively app, which I think is so awesome. And they can share with me sacredly and in a very intimate, connective space of like, hey, here's where I am on my cycle. And there's certain weeks where it's like, hey, I'm feeling strong this week. Like, I really want to try to lift heavy and have a little bit more intensity. And then it's usually in and around their cycle. The week before, there's a little bit more irritability. They crave a little bit more carbohydrates. The week of, they need a little bit more compassion. Some women need more protein and fat. Some women need more carbohydrates. And it is really interesting because the Lively app gives that feedback. And I'm very thankful and appreciative because I'm not going through that personally. So I'm holding space to be like, hey, I'm relying on you to share that information, update me on your sleep, your headspace, your motivation, how your body's feeling, what's going on with your joints, what's going on with ruminating thoughts and your relationships and your workflow. And what I look at there is just like, hey, let's coach the human being first. It's not just about like trying to fit somebody into your spreadsheet of a program. How do you kind of navigate some of those things and have honest conversations with women that are navigating their cycle?
Yeah, well, I think this is a great conversation to be had. I am really appreciative that you have an understanding of the female menstrual cycle because it is not something I discuss this. Actually, I teach on it a little bit in my one-on-one and in my group program just because most women are taught nothing about their
Mm-hmm.
menstrual cycle. And although that's not the focus of my work, as it's a lot more mindset, I do think it's really valuable to be able to understand yourself better, is to understand what's happening inside you. And that is a great conversation. I wish more men understood too, right? Because we are experiencing hormonal fluctuations throughout the
Yep.
month that make things different, how we're going to perform in the gym, what we might be eating, how we're going to feel emotionally. And so understanding that, oh, maybe I'm not just like feeling crazy, but I'm in my luteal phase and I'm having a little bit more stress or anxiety or heightened emotion is super helpful. So I don't navigate it too much in my work unless I'm working with a woman who's trying to recover her period. But but yeah, I think it's just an important conversation to be had, and so I do teach on that.
Yeah, it's such a cool critical concept. And I'm no expert, but I'm very fortunate to have been educated by a lot of the amazing women that I'm fortunate to coach. What are your thoughts on birth control? Because like you said, in a sport like CrossFit, women are very lean. There is birth control usage, whether that's to manage period symptoms and try to mitigate the cramping and some of the pain associated with that. Sometimes that's for responsibility and whatnot associated with sexual partners. But it is going to change your hormone structure a little bit. And you have people that are on it, and then you have people that are navigating, hey, I'm getting off birth control. And then I'm sure you also have experienced times where people are either postpartum or they're trying to get pregnant. And there's lots of different factors associated with it. There's so many variables to take into consideration how that impacts food, sleep, wellness, training. Where do you kind of start the education process there with different women that are kind of going through different things associated with birth control?
Yeah, so I definitely think there needs to be a lot more informed consent around birth control and understanding what is actually happening when I'm taking, if I'm taking like hormonal, like oral contraceptive pills, or am I getting an IUD? And these things are different. There's patches and different types of birth control that you can take. And so I think understanding too that, for instance, you're not having a period on hormonal birth control, you're having a withdrawal bleed from the pill, and knowing that your hormones are not their natural fluctuations of what's going on. Some women might need that for what they're experiencing health wise, but I do think it's often overprescribed without an understanding of what's happening of, oh, this is just going to regulate your cycle. When in reality, it's more like a band-aid. If there's something wrong with my cycle, if something's going on, if I'm not having regular periods or I'm having certain things, can we look deeper to the root of what might be happening rather than just sticking this band-aid on of birth control? Obviously, there's different reasons why people might go on birth control. And so it's going to be very individualized to the person. But I think what's really lacking in the space as far as it is like an actual understanding of what's happening when I go on it. And is this truly what I want to do? Because most women, I would say maybe not most women, a lot of women who I work with who have come off birth control feel better than when they were on. And so it is a conversation that needs to be had.
Mm-hmm. It also comes with just patience, right? Like the first month, you might not really know what's going on. The next month, you're going to get a little bit more information and data, and realizing that like at first you don't really know what to listen to. Like I might be craving more of this, more of this. You might have some consciousness that's all over the place, but realizing like it's okay. It's okay. Just notice. And the right people are going to kind of support you in that, and realize that those are simply variables and data points which can continually help you evolve. Because I know traditionally what I've seen as far as program design in the CrossFit space is that women can typically handle a little bit more volume, and men typically need a little bit less volume, higher intensity, maybe a little bit more load, just to manage kind of testosterone, estrogen, just kind of blanket statement and speak loosely. That's not always taken into consideration, because now in a world of supreme scaling and program design and every company under the sun selling online programming, it's like, oh, this worked for these CrossFit Games athletes and they've had supreme success, so you should do what they're doing. It's great from a marketing tactic, but I think it misses the boat as far as specificity. And that's not to wholeheartedly say that like one-on-one coaching is for everybody. I definitely believe in the group model and community and connection. But what are your thoughts there? Because it's like you have the business side of like scale, monetize, grow, market. And then you have the other side of just like everybody's not the same. And, it's not just pursuit of peak performance, because that's going to last a decade, maybe a little bit more. But then on the other side of things, like you want to see a life unlocked. And we're seeing, just to speak about two people that you and I know, Lauren Fisher's now pregnant. Katrin David's daughter is now pregnant. Annie Thor's daughter's had a baby. And we're seeing it, in the realm of these CrossFit athletes ready to move on. And some come back and some move on forever. And it's case dependent. But those are some really smart women that like manage their hormones and their food and all the different variables along the way. But not everybody has that. And sometimes they get a little bit lost in the sauce.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to get lost in the sauce as far as like thinking about my experience, right? When I first went to CrossFit Mayhem, I thought, I'm going to just do everything Rich Froning does, and then I'm going to be like so fit, and it's going to be awesome. And don't get me wrong, I got really fit doing a lot of things that Rich did, but the amount of volume that he was able to handle versus me, which it was very high volume. I know that women typically can handle more, but that volume actually, looking back now, was a slight detriment to I think I could have been a lot fitter if I knew myself better that, hey, maybe I do need to do a little bit less here, a little bit less intensity here, maybe not go so hard in the paint every single day, 8 times a day. And so it does take a little bit of a learning curve. I think there's a lot more coaches in the space too that can recognize, hey, maybe I'm coming into this group, this like blanket program, but also how can I adjust for my needs as far as what's going on that day, how I'm feeling, what injuries do I have? And so I do think the group model is possible, but it's also having an understanding to some extent of like, not just looking at programming and be like, this is what I'm doing. It's like, why am I doing this? What is the goal for this workout? Is it to go as hard as possible? Or is it zone 2? Or is it to work on skills? And so I think there's a level of athlete ownership of like, hey, I just didn't know what I didn't know at the time, and had this perception of like, it makes me think of that book, Women Aren't Small Men. And so just like this idea of like, oh, I'm just gonna, I think Stacy Sims wrote that book, but I'm just gonna do all of these things and it's gonna work out for me the exact same way, when actually CrossFit is very individualized to what's gonna be beneficial for each person. So that's partly on the coach, but that's also on the athlete as well.
Yeah, I definitely need to check out that book. Women Are Not Small Men. That's cool.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind there is community can be beautiful, but it can also be a little bit detrimental, because when you're like, hey, I'm going to do 4 rounds of this instead of 5. Now it's like excuse my French, but maybe the psychology in many gyms is, oh, you're just being a little bitch, or, you're taking the easy way out, or you just don't want to do the work, or you're just trying to be different, right? Like, oh, chest to bars are hurting my elbow today. Maybe I'll do toe to bar instead with a little bit more straight arm strength. Well, now you're different from the group. And I don't know, to me, it's like common sense now in my journey of like, if you want to be different, you can't just do the same thing everybody else is doing, which means doing more of something that's causing harm is not actually making you a better athlete. Coming from basketball, our number one statement was the best ability is availability. If you just keep fitting the square peg in the round hole and try to conform to everybody else's needs, it could be hurting you, which is pushing you further and further away from the ultimate goal. But you don't always know that when you're in a community, and like the community is kind of what keeps you coming back. It's the banter, it's the joy, it's the connection, it's the accountability. And it's interesting because like that word's thrown around like, oh, we all just need community. And it's like, yes and no. It comes with context for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And, all those decisions I made were my decisions. Nobody was saying you have to do this exact thing. It was my own thought process of like, no, I can't adjust. I can't change. I have to do it this way.
I don't want to be less than. Scaling means that I'm less than.
Truly, I struggled with that so hard. And actually, Rich was incredible a lot of times being like, no, actually, you probably shouldn't do that. Where I'm like, no, I have to do this. And so my experience competing on team was so fruitful as compared to individual. Like I loved individual too. But that self-sacrifice that comes in is like so deep, like the connections of I will literally do anything to help this team win. But that also can be your destruction if you're not within boundaries of like pushing towards injury or things like that. And so part of it is a learning curve for sure, is you're not just going to show up and get it right. You're going to probably have to go through some phases of maybe pushing yourself too hard or not enough. And kind of like we talked about, that's where failure can be really fruitful, but also having wise people around you, I think is huge. And so community in a sense, yes, getting around athletes is great, but also like we've been talking about, me knowing myself that maybe I don't need to jump into this workout with other people because I'm going to just go so intense and it's not going to be like beneficial to what my goal is.
Mm-hmm. How have you kind of paid this wisdom forward? I know you have a great close relationship with Haley Adams. There's been other athletes that are young up and comers that are in pursuit of, trying their best to get better and improve. And as I like to say, seek their peak expression. Have you paid this forward a little bit? And, Haley took some time off. There's been other athletes that have taken time off. And like you said, some come back, some don't. And that's okay. What I'm curious about is, what are some of those nuggets of wisdom that you share with some of these athletes to create a safe space? Sometimes it might just be a big hug of like, hey, it's okay. I'm here. You're not alone. And then other times it might be meaningful, deep conversation. Sometimes it might just be holding space and listening so they can vent. What does that look like for you? And how have you really played a pivotal role in being a mentor for some of these younger athletes?
So I think for me, it's really making, people feel seen, heard, and valued. And so like, hey, like you said, holding space for the experience of this is really hard. And I'm not saying that you can't. I think a lot of us want to just like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep going. And I think there is a lot of value in pushing forward, but also can we hold space and just allow ourselves to maybe be upset about a loss or frustrated about an injury or sad about a struggle that I'm going through. I think it's really important to hold that space and make people feel validated in that experience. And then also to come in alongside to be like, I'm here for you. Like when I think about my girl, Haley, I'm like, I am in your corner, like till the end of time, whether you're competing or not competing. Like you are such an amazing person that I want to support and just be a resource for, and her and anyone else that might come to me, but really being like, you're a whole person and competing is just one piece of your life. And so If you're getting after it, let's go. And if you want to take a step back, cool, I'm here. And so really just holding that space.
That's cool. I love to hear it. And holding space is hard, especially when it's almost like a child touching the stove. You're like, you don't want them to get hurt, but you also are like, you're not going to learn unless you touch the stove. And so sometimes, being in that position, you're just like, I want to fix it. I want to save you, but also it's not my role. My role is to be here and to co-pilot your journey. Let's jump in as we kind of wrap things up, Tasia. CrossFit's been incredibly volatile. We had the challenges with Lazar Dukic last year. The sport has been sold, I believe, like 3 times in the last 4 to 5 years. Leadership's danced a little bit. We've seen challenges with judging and the PFAA and things with Fikowski and Vellner kind of coming public around like, hey, we need better safety protocols put in place. When I speak to people, everybody kind of like scoots back and they're like, I don't know, it's not my position, not my role. I don't really want to comment on it, but it's like, it's kind of an important deal. Like this is something that's been around for quite some time. You and I spent about a decade competing in the space. And I think actually this weekend, everybody's in Indianapolis for the World Fitness Project kind of evolution, which I think those guys are doing some really cool things over there. But what are your thoughts on, the future of the sport? The word CrossFit has so much memory and history with it, but it also feels like it's almost a bad word now when kind of utilized. A lot of gyms are de-affiliating and kind of moving on. We're seeing the growth and development of High Rocks. And I don't know, there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding, variance, and just a rocky foundation. What are your thoughts kind of being in a similar space as me? Like we're kind of on the outside looking in now, but still it's like something meaningful.
Yeah, I think part of it, like you said, is I am on the outside looking in. I don't read the rule book or know the rules. I cheer my girl on, Haley, and some of my other friends compete in the space, but I'm very far removed from it. That being said, that's not me giving a cop out, but just recognizing that I don't have a lot of the understanding of the inner workings of what's going on right now. What I will say is back in 2013, when I started CrossFit, 2013, 14, 15, 16, honestly, all the way up through like 18, those roots, like the grassroots days, even though I know it goes way back before that, before like 2007, I think, it was just so fun. It was just so fun. And so when I think about like in this moment, because I haven't thought about it a lot, but what was different back then than it is now? I'm not really sure. Is it that the competition side has changed so much that there's been so much shifting and changing? Maybe. I feel like picking something and sticking with it would be really helpful as far as like a season, moving through the season, but also just coming back to just how fun CrossFit was. It really was about throwing down in the gym and then showing up to the games and doing really hard things, and pushing yourself to the limit. And so I think we've kind of lost that a little bit, which is partly on CrossFit, but I think it's also partly on culture. As like when I was competing, Instagram wasn't really a thing. Like we literally were doing it because it was fun. Like I didn't have sponsors. I wasn't getting paid. And so I think there's a lot of layers and a lot of nuance to the experience of what's happening now. I ultimately love CrossFit and I want to see it succeed. I really do. And I'm not sure what it would take for it to continue to grow and succeed, but that is my hope that it does.
No, it's very well said. I agree with you that I think what changed was technology. At that time, it was like people had a full-time job and they'd come to a CrossFit class, maybe 2, maybe did some lifting, accessory work, or skill work before or after. But it wasn't this dedicated time frame of like lifting 3 times a day, 6 Metcons a day. Your phone had to be up on a tripod and you had to show the behind the scenes of every element of your day, show your food. make sure you had product placement with your first form, or, you know, your grips or your belts, your shoes, whatever sponsor was monetizing you to continue in the sport. And I think it created this uniqueness early on where people were like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. I get to be a part of this person's journey for the totality. But I don't think human beings are really meant to be that fake and robotic of like, look at me doing the thing. It's like, in reality, you're just like, I'm freaking tired. That session kicked my ass. And I actually just don't want to be on my phone right now. And I think the culture of that was tough. I forgot who posted it. I think it was Patrick Clark yesterday, but it was so cool. Somebody posted like, hey, if we're watching the NFL and the referees make a bad call, well, that's just a bad call. Like, you move on, and then the next day, you know, one team won and one team lost. And you might talk about it, but it's not like reviewed by videos like 3 or 4 days later, and then you go back and you reverse the call. Now the other team wins. And like, that's kind of what's happening in some of these judgment calls. It's like, hey, you got the score. Video analysis takes place a week later, and now all of a sudden, you know, everybody's getting ripped under the sun by every podcast and media agency of like, oh, they cheated, they skirt the line here, let's reverse the call. They no longer get to make it. It's like, part of sport is actually having judgment calls that are either good or bad. And that's why I think there's some evolutions that can be done there. Yes, you know, it's a $20 judges course, and, you know, everybody has a different eye. You'd probably judge Rich Froning better than you judge me. And so, you know, there's some bias, of course, but I'm sure LeBron and Michael Jordan get some bias as well. So I don't know. Like, I don't know that I have like the solution, but I definitely think the sport has a really cool ideology to it. I don't know that the phrasing from a marketing standpoint is going to last, or the term CrossFit. I hope it does. I believe in those guys. I believe in the ethos. I love the concept of eating real food and community and functional movements consistently. I like the integration of varied intensity. I think there's probably a little bit too much intensity now sometimes. But that comes with social media, like you said, the culture and the comparison and the leaderboarding and the things that like are almost like fantasy sports and statistical analysis that like everybody wants to obsess over. They're silly in my opinion. But you give a really cool answer, and I really enjoyed kind of unpacking your story a little bit. What's the future for you kind of as 2025 continues to unlock your business kind of up and running? You found some systems and procedures that work for you. What's the future for Tasia?
So definitely continue to build out my business of Wonderfully Made, help as many women as I can find freedom with food, body, and exercise. I'm pursuing my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling to hopefully facilitate that as well in a better, deeper way with my clients. And then starting a family, God willing, just continuing to adventure with my husband and my dog and have a family and enjoy just the blessings of being alive. So, yeah.
I love it. From the outside looking in, you truly look like you found peace and adventure, and you're exploring, dreaming, discovering. I love the outdoorsy adventures with your family and your pup. And I'm so thankful that you carved out some time to connect today on ALLSMITH.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That was fun. Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Tasia, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.